Well, new data show that mercury emissions from U.S. power plants fell by 4%, but mercury pollution from coal-fired power plants in Michigan, Illinois, and Texas all rose. This is coming from an analysis of federal data done by the Chicago Tribune. EPA data show mercury blown into the air by Illinois coal plants rose 7% last year. Only Michigan saw a bigger increase. Texas was tied with Illinois for the second biggest increase, but emissions fell in 27 other states, including those that do rely heavily on coal, like Indiana, Ohio, and Georgia. Illinois' EPA enacted a rule back in 2006 that requires power plants to cut mercury emissions 90% by 2015. With all of the state's 21 coal-fired plants installing mercury control equipment by 2012. Bruce Nilles is the National Coal Campaign Director for the Sierra Club. He's here to talk a little bit more about this. Bruce, good to see you again.
Good morning.
So much of the talk since Copenhagen and surrounding that is about CO2, but we can't forget about the other harmful pollutants that come from coal-fired power plants. Now, what is going on with these three states? Are we talking about the type of coal? Because the levels of mercury vary in different kinds of coal.
It's a mix of, largely it's a mix of burning coal that has more mercury in it, as well as the fact that they're burning more coal. And so what we're seeing is that more than 2 decades after Congress said we have to address the most toxic emissions from coal plants, mercury and other hazardous air pollutants, we still don't have in place a regulatory framework nationwide that really makes sure that we're reducing mercury across the country. And so even though we saw a slight drop nationwide, about 4% nationwide, overall we're still putting out about 88,000 pounds of mercury every year into the environment, and this is a very potent neurotoxin. And so it really underscores we have this huge opportunity to cut emissions, and Obama administration is moving forward to do that.
Okay, right. So there still are no national restrictions on mercury emissions, but the White House has proposed national limits, or what's the status?
They have agreed, and there's a binding court order that will have final rules in place by 2011.
So for now it goes by state?
By now it's by state, and a lot of states have no regulation. And so we're seeing some states increase, some states decrease, but overall we're still putting out an enormous amount of pollution, even though there's readily available pollution controls out there today.
Tell us about mercury. Just how dangerous are emissions from coal-fired plants?
It takes a very small amount of mercury to have a very significant impact on human health. Scientists have estimated that approximately 1/70th of a teaspoon of mercury can pollute a 25-acre lake. And what happens is that mercury gets in the lake, it gets into the fish, and then when we consume the fish, it has terrible human health impacts. The biggest impact is on unborn children. And pregnant mothers pass the mercury through onto the unborn child, where it can have long-term brain damage impacts and a whole host of other mental impacts. And so that's where the real big impacts are and why we need to get mercury out of the environment.
This is why pregnant women are told not to eat tuna, mercury fish, which probably means nobody should.
It means that you should significantly limit your consumption and read the warnings about the different kinds of fish, because it's the larger fish like tuna that are the biggest risk of all.
Right. Now, Illinois, what's going on here? Emissions there up 7%, while so much of the rest of the country is lower. Chicago is actually called a hotspot for mercury, but Illinois does have that 90% mercury requirement by 2015. Are you happy with that? Is that on track?
It's certainly a step in the right direction. We know that they can do better, and we know the pollution control is available today. So they're proposing for another 2 years to take very little action and not install them until 2012. We could install them today, and we could be getting those pollution reductions, because the problem is once you get mercury into the environment, it's very hard to get out, because mercury simply cycles through the environment. So all that pollution we're putting in will stay there for a very, very long time.
And apparently Illinois power companies switched to Wyoming coal, which is good for sulfur, bad for mercury.
That's correct.
So those two things are at odds, I guess. But Illinois says all of its 5 plants should see mercury drop in the new year.
They're saying they expect it, but the reason Chicago is a hot spot is because it has 5 coal plants in and around the city. The city is literally ringed by coal-fired power plants. And so the health impacts of those coal plants has been having devastating impact on the community or the neighborhoods throughout Chicago. So it is long overdue. None of those coal plants today have the whole suite of modern pollution controls for nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and mercury. And these are really old dinosaurs having very huge impact in an area that hasn't met federal air quality standards since we've had federal air quality standards.
So what does the Sierra Club say about old coal-fired power plants, new equipment, new scrubbers, new plants, or?
They should get retired.
The old plants should be retired.
Yep.
The new ones should be built with scrubbers and with the best equipment.
We don't actually think you should build any new coal plants. Coal is the largest contributor to global warming. It's the largest source of industrial mercury. There's a whole suite of reasons why coal is not an energy future.
So over what period of time do you think we could phase out old coal plants and the newer ones?
If you look at what the science says, Dr. Jim Hansen and the folks at NASA They say we have about 2 decades to end coal's contribution to global warming. So that essentially says over the next 2 decades, let's begin systematically replacing coal with all the clean energy alternatives out there. Just about 15,000 megawatts of coal, take it offline each year and replace it with a whole suite of clean energy choices that create more jobs and have no pollution consequences.
Like what? What do you see the future bridge being?
The mix is obviously there's much more we can do on energy efficiency, help people save electricity, wind, solar, biomass, geothermal in some places, and then obviously natural gas to help back up the intermittent fuels.
Now, you're not happy with Governor Granholm of Michigan's decision to approve a plant and another one possibly on the way?
That's right. I mean, Michigan, if you think about what's the most expensive, dirty option for Michigan today, they picked it. They picked to propose a new pulverized coal plant. Pulverized coal plants have essentially become unacceptable across the country, but Michigan and Texas and Kentucky and a couple other states are really the sort of last holdout of where they're still proposing this really outdated technology.
The DEQ there says this new air permit approved for a new coal plant with better filtering could take 3 older coal plants offline, 87% decrease in mercury pollution.
They're saying it could, and the coal plants that they're talking about taking offline were ones that are already going to be retired. When you look at net impacts of overall pollution, that new plant will put out millions of tons of carbon dioxide at the very time we're trying to reduce the problem of global warming. So it's actually taking the state in exactly the wrong direction. And from an economic development perspective, it makes no sense. Michigan doesn't mine coal. It has no coal resources. It has huge wind resources, huge solar potential, has natural gas. There's no reason from a jobs perspective or an economic or an environmental perspective they're proposing coal, which simply ships their ratepayer money out to Wyoming to buy more dirty coal.
Okay, but White House moves to require deeper and faster cuts of mercury. Those are going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Okay, Bruce Nilles with the Sierra Club, thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
We appreciate your insight.